Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to guide you through today's topic. We're going to be focusing on a seriously fascinating dynamic, how the government acts as this massive, intentional counterweight to keep our entire economy from, well, going completely off the rails. It's a really delicate balancing act, and honestly, once you understand how it works, it completely changes how you look at the news, government budgets, and just the broader financial world all around us.
Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever actually stopped to wonder what forces prevent total economic collapse or runaway inflation? I mean, when the gears of the economy start grinding to a halt, or maybe when they start spinning way too fast, it's not like there's some automatic switch that just flips, right? There has to be an active participant who steps in to physically hit the brakes or slam on the gas. So today, we're going to unpack exactly who that is and the specific tools they use to pull it off.
Here's our quick roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with Section 1, the economic roller coaster. Then, Section 2, enter the macro balancer. Section 3, Phase 1, fighting depression. Section 4, Phase 2, taming inflation. And we'll wrap it all up with Section 5, the ultimate balancing act. Let's get right to it.
Section 1, the economic roller coaster, the threat of instability. Because to understand the cure, we really have to understand the condition first. Let's establish the stakes of an economy that naturally swings out of balance. So, the very first thing to grasp here is that economies, they aren't naturally static. They don't just sit there peacefully in the state of perfect Zen-like equilibrium. Instead, they constantly face these dual threats. On one end, you have the threat of stalling out completely, which, as we know, leads to a depression. On the flip side, there's the very real threat of overheating into an inflationary boom. Left totally to its own devices, the economy is basically a giant roller coaster swinging wildly between these two extremes.
Which brings us to Section 2, enter the macro balancer, the government's toolkit. So, who actually manages this roller coaster? Let's introduce the entity that steps in to handle these wild economic swings and look at the exact toolkit they bring to the table.
That toolkit, it's called fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is essentially the policy under which the government uses the instruments of taxation, public spending, and public borrowing to achieve its economic objectives. So the crucial point here, the big takeaway, is that this is literally the master control board for economic stability. The government can tweak taxes, adjust how much it's borrowing, or change how much it spends, all to influence income, production, and employment.
Now for our explainer today, we're going to zoom in on just one specific dial on that master control board, and that is public expenditure. This refers to the expenses incurred by public authorities, whether we're talking central, state, or local government. They spend money for their own maintenance, to meet collective needs of the public, and to promote general economic and social welfare. We are talking about massive investments in things like defense, public health, public works, and education. And let me tell you, this spending power is a uniquely potent tool. Our source material actually sums this up perfectly. It says public expenditure policy can be effectively used as an anti-cyclical instrument for bringing about economic stability. Now, the key phrase you really want to pay attention to here is anti-cyclical. All that means, in plain English, is that the government is deliberately doing the exact opposite of what the economic cycle is doing. If the economy is sinking, the government lifts it up. If it's flying dangerously high, the government pulls it back down. They're actively pushing against the cycle to force stability.
Section 3, Phase 1, fighting depression. Let's see how this actually works out in the real world by looking at our first extreme scenario. Picture this. The economy is stalling. Output is dropping fast, people are losing their jobs, and demand has just totally dried up. We're in a depression.
In this scenario, the government has to act as a savior to jumpstart that stalled engine. First, during a depression, they raise expenditure on a massive scale via direct public investment. This huge injection of cash adds directly to aggregate demand. Almost overnight, businesses suddenly have orders to fill again, simply because the government is buying. And that inevitably results in the revival of national output and employment. Literally by cranking that spending dial all the way up, the government creates jobs and gets the gears turning again.
Let's move on and see how this builds into the complete picture. We just saw the heavy injection of cash used during a depression to revive demand, right? But remember what we said earlier. This is an anti-cyclical tool. So when the environment changes, the policy absolutely must violently shift to reduce expenditure and curb excess demand.
Section 4, Phase 2, taming inflation. And that shift brings us right into Phase 2. We're going to deliberately slow down our pacing a bit here, because now the economy is running way too hot. We've entered the inflationary boom phase. The objective is no longer about jump-starting the engine. It's entirely about curbing the momentum before the whole thing spins out of control.
See, during a boom period, there's this dangerous amount of excess demand, which can lead directly to runaway inflation. The state has to step in to curb that demand. Now, what's really interesting here is the specific way they do it. The government directly reduces its public expenditure, basically acting as a strict manager to cool things off. But, and this is absolutely crucial, our sources note they do this while maintaining the exact same levels of taxation and borrowing. They aren't altering the whole control board. They are specifically pulling back their own spending footprint to drain just enough excess demand out of the economy to prevent inflation.
Section 5. The Ultimate Balancing Act. Okay, so we've explored the heavy acceleration during a depression and the deliberate braking during a boom. Let's transition to our final synthesis to see exactly how these two opposing actions serve one overarching purpose.
And this brilliantly illustrates the entire seesaw framework we've been talking about. In the depression phase, the action is to raise spending on a massive scale, resulting in revived output and employment. Conversely, over in the inflationary boom phase, the action is to reduce spending, again, while keeping taxes and borrowing the same, which results in curbed demand and controlled inflation. It is a perfect mirror image. The government is constantly monitoring which side of the seesaw is dipping too low or rising too high, and they just throw the weight of public expenditure onto the opposite side to level the whole thing out.
Because ultimately, whether the government is cranking the spending dial up to fight a depression or dialing it back to tame inflation, the goal of this macro balancer remains exactly the same. They're trying to secure these three key pillars: stability of income, stability of output, and stability of employment. That is what economic stability actually means for you and me at the end of the day. It means knowing that your job, your income, and the cost of everyday goods aren't just going to vanish or skyrocket overnight because of some wild economic swing.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Look at the headlines. Look at the national budget being debated right now. How are these balancing factors of public expenditure playing out in your own economic environment today? Is your government currently hitting the gas to revive demand, or are they pumping the brakes to curb inflation? Seriously, keep this framework in your back pocket the next time you're reading the news. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.